Hi everyone, this is Jen Colucci here on World Photography Day 2023 with OM System Ambassador Chris McGinnis. Chris, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. As Jen said, I'm OM System Ambassador Chris McGinnis. I'm a macro photographer. I actually specialize in field macro work with insects and spiders.
Awesome. What initially drew you to macro photography?
So I've always really liked the details that you see in macro photos, but for me, when I started out, I was photographing really anything small, fibers on the carpet, little mechanisms. And then it was when I got into the field and I started discovering these little creatures that maybe I'd overlooked or didn't know that existed to begin with, that I really got sucked into macro.
Great. What specific equipment do you rely on for your photography and why do you find it essential?
My macro setup's really simple. It's just an OM1 camera body. Macro lens, I use either the 60mm f2.8 macro or the new 90mm f3.5 macro IS Pro lens. And then I add a flash and a diffuser. And that's really all I need so I can be kind of nimble and agile when I'm out in the field.
How do you approach the challenge of finding and selecting subjects for your shots?
Finding macro subjects can be a challenge, but I really choose to kind of enjoy the journey. So if I'm looking for something specific, I'll do research, I'll research the habitats, I'll research the behaviors of the subjects that I'm looking for. I like to go out early in the morning while there's less chance of my subjects flying away as I approach. But I really like to just kind of enjoy looking for the subjects, seeing what I find, finding new things, and just kind of seeing how it goes along the way.
Macro photography often requires an extreme attention to detail. How do you ensure sharp focus and maintain depth of field in your images?
Yeah, there's really nowhere to hide in macro, right? If your subject's out of focus, everyone's going to see it. And depth of field can be a challenge because as you're really close to a subject, depth of field decreases. Thankfully, Micro Four Thirds cameras like the OMSYSTEM.Cameras, they tend to yield a little bit more depth of field than some of the competitors. So that's a huge help. When I'm shooting single frame shots, I like to stick to or around f8, maybe a little bit smaller. And then when I'm focus stacking, I can open my aperture up a bit to take advantage of those larger apertures.
And lighting plays a crucial role in macro photography. What techniques or tools do you employ to achieve optimal lighting conditions for your subjects?
Since lighting is really unpredictable, sometimes I'm in the shade, sometimes I'm crawling around on the ground, or I'm under the trees, I like to have a flash on my camera at all times, and that makes my lighting really predictable. So I take that variable out of the equation. Sometimes I'm out at night, and I always know that I can expose my subject with a flash, and that also lets me take advantage of the lower ISOs, which produces a cleaner image.
Do you have any preferred techniques or strategies for capturing insects or small creatures in their natural habitats without disturbing them?
Yeah, this is probably the #1 question that I get actually. So people are always curious as to how the heck I get so close to subjects to take photos of them without them flying away. And truth be told, they fly away really often. So I miss a lot of shots, but I have learned in my time as a photographer that going out early in the morning, approaching really slowly, and not rushing in on a subject. The faster I move, the more likely a subject is to fly away. So I'll start out back a little bit, I'll take a few shots, I'll inch closer, and as I get closer, I'll take more and more shots. And if I'm really lucky, my subject is comfortable enough to let me get nice and close, and then I can get those shots that I really want.
Macro photography allows us to see intricate details that are not visible to the naked eye. How do you balance capturing these details while still conveying a compelling and aesthetically pleasing composition?
Yeah, even though macro is all about the details and there's nowhere to hide in a macro photo, if you make a mistake, everyone's going to see it. I do try to make sure I nail that critical focus, but I'm also considering traditional principles of composition. So the same principles that would apply to any type of photo, rule of thirds or leading lines or symmetry, they all apply in macro. In particular, I like to get really low to offer an alternative perspective that brings viewers into the world of my subjects.
As we're talking about getting up close and personal with your subject, how do you deal with any discomfort or potential hazards associated with working in such close proximity?
Yeah, a lot of people often want to know how many times I've been bitten or stung by subjects. And while those hazards do exist, just like with larger subjects, if you respect your subjects, if you take it slow, that's usually all it takes to stay safe.
I saw your poisonous snake photo from Costa Rica, and
one of us was scared.
What tips or advice would you give to aspiring macro photographers who are just starting out in this genre?
Yeah, if someone's interested in getting into macro, I tell them first and foremost, really learn the ins and outs of your gear. Practice with inanimate subjects, indoors and outdoors, and just don't be afraid to fail.
How do you stay inspired and continually find new subjects or angles to photograph in the world of macro?
Yeah, there's really two ways that I stay inspired for my macro. The first is social media. I follow a lot of great macro photographers on social media. I engage with them. I'm constantly looking at their work. And I'm also inspired by the sense of discovery that macro brings me. So I'm not typically discovering new species, but they're new to me. And for me, that sense of discovery is all the same, right? So I go out into the field, I find something, I've never seen it before, I get photos, I go home and I learn about it, and then that kind of carries me through to the next trip.
Speaking of social media, would you like to share with our audience your social handles?
Yeah, of course. If you're on Instagram, you can find me at Innis2Winnis. On Facebook, Chris McGinnis Macro, or you can just go to chrismcginnis.com and find everything from there.
Excellent. Macro photography provides a unique perspective on everyday objects. Can you share an example where you found extraordinary beauty in something ordinary through your lens?
Yeah, for sure. When I talk about macro, I often talk about this concept of finding interest in the ordinary. So taking something that's very common or maybe people overlook and then blowing it up big, showcasing it in a way that people really aren't used to. And oftentimes people ask me, happens a lot with jumping spiders. They'll say, oh my God, where did you find this thing? Or how did you get so close? Or isn't that scary? And people are often surprised when I say, oh, that was in my backyard, or that was on my window. And you probably have them in your backyard and are on your windows too.
I know you photograph a lot of bugs. Do you have a favorite bug subject or type of subject that you prefer to photograph?
Yeah, I have a lot of favorites. Since I just mentioned jumping spiders, I'll definitely say jumping spiders have always been a favorite. Spiders aren't typically something people consider cute or cuddly, but there's just something about those big round eyes on a jumping spider that makes them kind of adorable.
Can you share a time when you had to think creatively or problem solve in order to capture the perfect macro shot?
One of the biggest problems that I'm solving regularly is depth of field. So managing depth of field with macro photography can be pretty tricky. Thankfully, Micro Four Thirds cameras, like the cameras from OMSYSTEM, they yield more depth of field than some of the competitors' cameras. But I still need to maximize my depth of field. So when I want more of a subject in focus, I'll tip my lens up or down to try and get more of that subject aligned to the focal plane. Sometimes the easiest way is just to photograph a subject in profile.
What do you hope viewers take away from your macro photos? Is there a specific message you aim to convey through your work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm aiming to show people things in a new way, and I hope that that can encourage them to look at things in a new way. So maybe after seeing a photo of a spider, they think twice about squashing a spider. Or when they see a photo of a fly, maybe they think twice about swatting that fly.
What specific feature do you find most appealing about OMSYSTEM cameras?
I really feel like OM system cameras have a lot to offer when it comes to macro. Great image stabilization, weather sealing, portability, amazing macro lenses, but I would say my #1 favorite feature is the in-camera focus bracketing and focus stacking ability.
Can you tell our audience a little more about focus bracketing and focus stacking and what they do?
Yeah, so sometimes I want to get even more depth of field than I can achieve in a single shot, even with a small aperture. So I can bracket my focus, meaning I can vary focus from shot to shot, and then I can stack the in-focus areas in post-processing or in camera, right in the OM1, to create an expanded or deeper perceived depth of field.
If you were limited to just one single lens on your camera, which one would you choose and why?
Well, that's an easy answer. Since I got my hands on the new 90mm f3.5 Macro IS Pro lens, it's been on my camera almost the entire time. It has insane magnification, it's weather sealed, it has in-lens image stabilization, and on top of everything, it's super sharp.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on World Photography Day 2023 with Chris McGinnis.
Thanks.